First, we need to make an appropriate size mixing palette. You're just gonna need cardboard from like Amazon boxes or a cereal box that you can cut up, some wax paper or freezer paper, some strong tape like painter's tape or duct tape or a packaging tape would work, and some scissors. And you're just gonna wrap the wax paper over the cardboard like a present. The cardboard should be at least 11 by 14. Remember, we don't want it too small. The reason why we're not using paper plates is because the space is too small. And when the space is too small, colors end up touching and creating muddy, desaturated colors faster. Desaturated is when black or white is added to the color to create a more gray or muted color. And saturated is when there's no white or black. It's just pure pigment, pure color, and it's extremely vibrant. The materials you will be needing for today's project are gouache. A variety of high and low brands of gouache is perfectly fine. You want soft hair brushes, 2 to 3 water cups, Bristol paper or some sort of hard watercolor cotton rag paper, golden flow release, which is going to be our extender. This helps keep the pigments in the gouache from drying out too fast. A towel just to wipe your brushes on to help keep them clean, and Q-tips if things get a little too out of control on the paper. Here is my reference photo that I will be painting from, and you want to make sure that you have it right by you. I have mine on my computer screen, that's why you keep seeing me look up. First, I'm going to start laying out my warm colors on one side and my cool colors on the other side. Since there's a lot of orange tones in her face, I'm going to start laying out my oranges because I know I'm going to use that the most. And then I go on to the next color, flesh tone, so like yellows and beiges. And then I go on to reds, and I only use 2 reds because there's not too much red in her skin. I'm using a crimson and a Venetian, and Venetian spreads like wildfire, so use it sparingly. My cool colors, like my blues, I'm going to lay on the opposite side of my warms, my oranges, near my dark. And my dark is actually not going to be a black. It's actually going to be a Payne's gray mixed in with some burnt umber. I always make my own black from Blue and Brown. You never really want to use a store-bought black because it's too flat. When you mix your own black, there tends to be more dimension and more depth, especially on the face or on a figure. There's just more modeling on it, creating more space within this 2D space. Then I'm going to put my white in one corner and my black or my darkest color in the complete opposite corner, so they're far away from one another. For my white, I'm putting more than the other colors. I'm putting a couple squeezes of white out, and that's because I know I'm going to be mixing a lot of white to balance out the skin tone. And normally we use a zinc white when painting skin tones, but with gouache, you're going to want to use a titanium. The zinc in gouaches is just too transparent, so I like to use a titanium white when I'm using gouache. When mixing gouache, you're going to want to have 2 to 3 water cups, one for warm colors, one for cool colors, and I like to have an extra one just to help keep my brushes a little bit cleaner. A key to a great painting is keeping your brushes clean, so therefore your colors don't get desaturated, aka muddy. With gouache, you do not need to mix with a palette knife. You can go straight ahead mixing with your brush, and that's because gouache, like watercolor, is 100% pigment. Unlike acrylic that has a plastic binder in it, and oil paint that has a linseed binder in it, that you need to use a palette knife, but not with gouache because it's 100% pigment. Okay, so now we're actually mixing colors, trying to find the right skin tone, and you're not looking for the color that of her makeup, you're looking for the color that's underneath her skin. And that's one reason why I did a hot pink. So the hot pink would glow underneath those neutrals that I'm starting to lay down and actually give her some blood so she doesn't look dead or too much caked on makeup looking when you paint. Now that I have a majority of my colors mixed for her skin tones, now I'm gonna start laying them out into the shapes that I see on her face, or the planes that I see on her face. And the shapes are gonna help give it a more three-dimensional look, a more modeled look again. So you just want to look for shapes, just lay the color down, try not to fuss with the color too much. When you fuss with it, that's when the colors get muddy or desaturated. You want to lay the paint down and forget it and go on to the next shape on the face. And you always want to make sure that you have a reference photo nearby. My reference photo is on my computer, so that's why you see me looking up and down constantly. Once you get a couple of the general shapes down and her skin tone down, then you're going to want to go into the dark colors. Normally people do the darks first, but since we're working wet into wet, we're going to do them halfway through so they don't get too desaturated. Now that we got some of our darks in, you can go ahead, paint your heart out, and just lay down all those colors that you see. If you want to take or wipe color away with your rag, just wipe carefully. Try not to rip or tear the paper when you're rubbing the rag against the paper. Or use a Q-tip if you feel like a brush is just not cutting it for you. Try a Q-tip. And you don't really want to spend no longer than an hour on this, on her face especially, because then things start to get too muddy. You want to quickly move on to the next. You want to do her hair and then her clothes. When in doubt, if you feel like things are going wrong or colors are getting desaturated or you just feel like you're overworking the painting to death, just stop, let it dry, and then come back the next day and you can paint on top of it and it won't reignite the colors from underneath. You can just paint directly on top.